Hello, boys and girls. So, you are getting to a point where this draft is really starting to sound pretty good, right? You're bringing out the meaning of your story. We've added a little bit. Today, we're going to continue on with our revision work about bringing forth the story arc. And if you're not quite sure what a story arc is just yet, I have a feeling once we go over this, it's going to be something you've talked about in previous grades. Now, I was the kind of writer as a kid where I would write my first draft and I would just crack my fingers, sit back and be like, I'm done. That is not the way that we want to be. In fact, when we first have these drafts on paper, our work is really just beginning. We want to make sure that we are doing everything we can to make it as great as it can be. And one quote that I like with this is, when you're done, you've just begun. And that's really how our writing's going to go this year. We're spending a lot of time on our revision work because that is important. Now, today you're going to be learning that when you write a personal narrative, you are writing stories. And because you're a great reader, you already know the way that stories typically go. One of the most powerful ways that you can improve your personal narratives is to look at this as a story, as a reader, and think about whether you brought everything you know as a reader to this as far as writing goes. So, we will start off by looking at an example, and then you're going to apply this work to your own personal narrative. So, first off, how do stories typically go? Usually, stories start by introducing a main character. Your main character is a person who has hopes, dreams, wishes, wants, motivations, traits. That should be how stories start. Then there's usually some kind of problem. Maybe something with those hopes or motivations lead the main character to get into some sort of trouble or face some tension with other characters or other events in the story. Then the problem usually gets worse, right? We feel it building, and that's when we as readers are so excited to see what happens next. And finally, the story usually ends in some kind of resolution. Now, this doesn't need to be rainbows and butterflies and everything being perfect, but it does bring us some feeling of closure. Now, we are going to practice this today by listening to a story called Peter's Chair. And while we're listening to this story, I really want you thinking about how it's following these events of the ways a story typically goes.
Peter's Chair, written and illustrated by Ezra Jack Keats. Peter stretched as high as he could. There, his tall building was finished. Crash! Down it came.
What are we already noticing, right? We have our main character, Peter. Peter likes to build things. You could come up with traits about that, right? He's creative. His tower just got smashed down, right? So he is already facing a little bit of problems with this. Let's see how he deals with it, and that will tell us a little bit more about Peter.
Shh! Called his mother. You have to play more quietly. Remember, we have a new baby in the house.
We're starting to see some of Peter's problem, right? There's a baby. And those of you who have little siblings or have had babies in the house know that creates a lot of problems for the older siblings sometimes.
Peter looked into his sister Susie's room. His mother was fussing around the cradle. That's my cradle, he thought. And they painted it pink. Hi, Peter, said his father. Would you like to help paint Sister's high chair? It's my high chair, whispered Peter.
We're starting to see a trait, right? That jealousy coming out in Peter. These are his things, and we're making the problem even worse. Not only can he not play with his blocks, they painted his cradle pink, and now they want him to help paint his own high chair.
He saw his crib and muttered, "My crib. It's painted pink too." Not far away stood his old chair. "They didn't paint that yet," Peter shouted. He picked it up and ran to his room. "Let's run away, Willie," he said. Peter filled a shopping bag with cookies and dog biscuits. "We'll take my blue chair, my toy crocodile, and the picture of me when I was a baby." Willie got his bone.
We're feeling that tension really be at its maximum here, right? He's running away. So all these problems led to Peter wanting to run away. He's packing his bag, and this is where the reader just wants to know what's going to happen next.
They went outside and stood in front of his house. "This is a good place," said Peter. He arranged his things very nicely and decided to sit in his chair for a while. But he couldn't fit in the chair. He was too big. His mother came to the window and called, "Won't you come back to us, Peter dear? We have something very special for lunch." Peter and Willie made believe they didn't hear, but Peter got an idea.
So feel that tension kind of starting to come down, right? Now Peter realizes he doesn't even fit in this chair anymore, so it's not that useful to him. Now his mom is giving him some attention, wanting him to come back in the house, and now we're going to listen to how it all gets resolved.
Soon his mother saw signs that Peter was home. "That rascal is hiding behind the curtain," she said happily. She moved the curtain away, but he wasn't there. "Here I am!" shouted Peter. Peter sat in a grown-up chair. His father sat next to him. "Daddy," said Peter, "let's paint the little chair pink for Susie." And they did.
So, when we are thinking about applying this to our own stories, what we are thinking about is this story arc. And it really follows that pattern, right? We feel the characters get introduced. Peter wants his family to stay the way it is. We start seeing that problem, but there's the baby. He's not getting attention. They even painted his cradle, and he's going to run away. And then we start to feel it all come back down. He realizes, I don't even fit in this chair. His mom starts giving him that attention again, and then he realizes, you know what? It's kind of nice to be grown up too in this family, and decides to do a kind thing for his sister. And that's really the arc of that story. Now, today, what I want you to do is to apply this to your own story that you're writing. So what I want you to do is to draw out a story arc for your story. So think about introducing your character at the beginning. I'm going to think about my dad with football. And then I'm going to think about how I can make that problem really start building, about how he's going to ask his parents into that ultimate moment where they're saying no, and then how it gets resolved after they tell him no. You draw that out for your own story, just the story arc, and filling in the pieces as they go. You should have at least 5, right? The beginning, building up, the ultimate, oh my gosh, starting to fix the problem and coming all the way down. Fill those in for your story. Tomorrow, we will go back and revise our drafts. Now, you may find, oh my gosh, I don't really have something leading to the problem. I just went straight to it. You might need to add some events, some details in here to make it fit this story structure. That's okay. Tomorrow, then, when we go back to revise these, those are the areas you'll work on. All right, go to your story mountains today and get going on thinking through the arc of your story.